Welcome back to the First Reviews channel. I'm Gal Balaban, sitting here with Sarah Kambe Holland, the director of Egghead and Twinkie, coming of age buddy road comedy, romantic comedy, even of sorts. I've seen the film. It's very charming, sweet, awkward, hilarious at times. I wanted to start by asking you, Sarah, about your unique filmmaking journey and how the idea first came to fruition.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, this film has been such a long journey, a 6-year journey by now. But when it started, the idea first came to me shortly after I came out to my own parents. And I started thinking, I don't think I've ever seen a movie about the coming out process that's funny and comedic. And so that was the initial seed of an idea was, can I make a comedy out of, coming out of the closet?
And so, from what I understand, this is considered to be like the first feature film to actually be crowdfunded through TikTok, which is a platform that you've been active on for a while. How did that in any way expand what you and the crew thought was possible when it comes to, um, you know, lifting your film off the ground?
Oh, it opened so many doors for us, which is crazy. But basically, yeah, we pitched the film on TikTok. It was kind of like a 1 minute elevator pitch, and it blew up overnight, which was so exciting, but also terrifying because we went from having like 2 followers to 100,000 people that were now invested and they wanted to hear more about the film. So it kind of gave us a kick in the butt, to get everything organized and get everything going. And a lot of those people ended up donating to the film. So we do say the film was at least partially crowdfunded on TikTok, which is really amazing. Just the power of the internet and social media and all these thousands of people just came on board to help us make this thing.
And where did this come, like before or after you had the short film already as proof of concept?
This was after. So we
Mhm.
shot the short in 2018, and then we started marketing it on TikTok in 2020. Um, and at that point, thankfully, the script and stuff was done. We were in pre-pro. It's just that production had been stalled because of COVID.
So when you were like approaching the titular friendship and the mood of the film with the actors and the crew, were there any, I guess, songs, films, books that you like to show them as reference for what the tone you wanted to emulate?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's so many references. I'd say Juno is one that's up there. Little
That's a
Miss
good one.
Sunshine. People always bring up Scott Pilgrim, and I think that's fair too, because it's Scott Pilgrim's based on a graphic novel, and Egghead and Twinkie, you find out at the end, is like kind of based on a comic book, or like there's comic book ties to it. And Twinkie wants to be an animator too, so all those influences kind of tie in together. But yeah, when I was talking to the actors, I wrote them very in-depth like character bios that were like 5 pages long. And then I also made them playlists of a bunch of songs that I thought their characters would listen to. And then they built off of those playlists and I think added their own songs.
And were some of those songs like some of the ones that we get to hear that make it into the film?
Yes, yeah. So the songs in the film were such a big part of this movie from the very beginning. I was listening to those songs when I was writing the script. And then, once we got to the stage where we were talking to record labels, like through our music supervisor to try to lock
Mhm.
in all those songs, that was such a long process, but I think it was worth it in the end.
Well, as you mentioned, the main character Twinkie wants to be an animator. Animation, art, and creativity play such a role in the film. Can you talk about where that came from and how art has played into your life? Even as we see in the film, it helps her sort of, whether in her imagination or whether she's actually interacting with it, get through even the most mundane of situations. Getting through a shift at work or a conversation at a restaurant. How has art played into your life in that way?
Yeah, I found that art has always been a way for me to express myself. And I think that that's what it is for Twinkie, too. She wants to be an animator and she sees the world in this kind of artistic, colorful, poppy way. So I feel like the animation is a manifestation of her feelings, her emotions, maybe how she processes a situation. And so that was a really fun challenge as a director to be working alongside our lead animator and figuring out, what are the moments where animation accentuates the scene and what are the moments where maybe animation isn't needed. So that was a really fun kind of trial and error process to be like, oh, do we need animation here or do we not? Yeah, it was fun.
And beyond that, I think there's also the interaction with the costumes and the sets and the really intricate color schemes, which I love. And a lot of it feels intentional because it stands out in a great way. What were like the conversations with, the production designers and the costume designers on the film on designing this world that really pops out?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was such a collaborative process. We had an amazing production designer, Luke Sanders, an awesome art director and wardrobe team. So it was very much a collaboration, talking about the characters and how they express themselves. So like Twinkie is very artistic, so I think her clothes kind of reflect that. She has, a very unique sense of style. Meanwhile, Egghead, I think his mom picks out all his clothes. So, just kind of filling in the backstory behind why they dress the way that they do. And then we also have this terrifying mascot costume, this giant
Mhm.
dirty sun mascot costume. And that was such a fun challenge because initially we thought, oh, maybe we can buy a mascot costume and modify it. But those costumes were all at like $800, $900. And we thought, oh, micro budget film, we can't spare $900 on one costume. So Luke and our wardrobe person, Alejandra, ended up building that costume from scratch. So it's made out of like chicken wire and old blankets, and it's terrifying and one of my favorite parts of the film.
Another important part that you alluded to being very personal and universal in a way is actually Twinkie's coming out moment to Egghead as well, being like, a very funny but awkward and sweet and odd kind of moment. Can you talk about what it was like with the actors and also with the DP, like designing and getting that moment and the balance emotionally just right?
Oh my gosh, yeah, filming that scene was so funny because it's, set in the movie theater and spoiler alert, Egghead has just kissed Twinkie and she did not enjoy it. And that's what kind of prompts her to just spontaneously come out like, oh, I'm gay. I don't think she was planning on it in that moment. So that scene, it was just so funny to film because the actors that play Egghead and Twinkie, Lewis and Sabrina, had known each other for a few years at that point because we shot a proof of concept short before we shot the feature. So they basically felt like best friends, brother sister vibes. So when I told them, you guys have to do this kissing scene, neither of them was excited about it. Lewis could barely keep it together. He was like laughing every time. So that was just really kind of a fun environment on set. But I think, ultimately what it comes down to is like, yes, it's a funny moment and it plays funny when you watch it with a crowd. But it is a moment of real vulnerability for Twinkie, to have to open up and say, this is who I am, especially when she was like unprepared to have to say it in that moment. So I think for Sabrina, she was kind of walking that fine line of comedy, but also giving Twinkie a real emotional depth.
Absolutely. And to what you said earlier, is Lewis breaking, was that a constant throughout all of filming? Breaking mid shot?
Thankfully not. No, they're both pretty professional about it. But that scene in particular, it's that one and then the scene at the end of the film where he's like wearing a rainbow outfit and the rainbow wig. He
Right.
just could barely keep it together because it's so silly, He's just admittedly he was having to do some very silly stuff.
Yeah, it's like within the film, it could be seen as very embarrassing for Egghead. So it's like very, like an outlandish moment for him, particularly.
Oh yeah. I was pushing him to the brink because also Lewis must have been he wasn't all that old when we were shooting. Maybe he was like 19 or something. So he's teenage boy. He'd still get embarrassed sometimes. So that's fair enough.
How much does improv play into the process when you're shooting, or do you like to more think of the ideas beyond what's on the page during rehearsal and then shoot it as you've rehearsed?
For the most part, it was mostly as scripted. I think improv lines. Um, there are a few that happen, and then maybe it was like rephrasing lines, where it's like the line is basically the same, but they're kind of rephrasing it in a way that sounds more natural to them. So I'm always open to that. I think probably the biggest moment that deviated from the script that comes to mind is actually that same scene I was just talking about where
Mhm.
Lewis was wearing that rainbow outfit. And they have that hug at the end, which is like a really pivotal point in the story because Twinkie's really been kind of down in the dumps. So that script was not, or that hug was not scripted. That was actually Lewis and Sabrina came to me and they were like, we really feel passionately that there should be a hug in this scene. And I listened to them, and that was the smart thing to do because they were right.
Yeah, I think it makes the scene all the much better. And was there anything you also feel like discovered, whether about the story or the tone in the editing room, that wasn't already there?
Oh, totally. So many discoveries. You know, there's that saying that like a film is written 3 times, once when you're writing the script and then in production and then in post. So funny enough, I was actually talking to one of the editors on the film earlier today, Christy League, and we were kind of reminiscing about that very thing, all the discoveries that we made in post. So one of them is actually the opening scene of the film. So the film opens with this animated sequence. It's like a minute or so long where you see like cartoon Twinkie comes out and she basically tells you how she and Egghead are friends and they set the scene for their friendship. And then we dive into the story. So that entire introduction did not exist. It was not written into the script. It was something that came about because we were doing test screenings of the film. And we kept getting the same feedback from the audience, which was that we hate the opening scene because we don't know who either of these people are and we're not invested in them at all. And so I was like, oh my God, how are we going to solve this? And Christy was the one that came to the table and said, oh, what if we do like a Into the Spider-Verse thing and we open with like an animated sequence? And so that was a very happy discovery.
I want to hear a little more about, I guess, the reception now that you've screened the film to some audiences. What, if anything, has stood out, you feel has resonated? What are some of the most meaningful pieces of feedback you've gotten from people who have seen the film?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's been one of the most rewarding parts of the process, I think, has been hearing how it's impacted people. Because, you know, film is so much more than the filmmaker. You then put it out there in the world and people will have their own experience with it. I think I've been especially touched by older queer people that have come up to me after the screening and said things like, oh, you know, I really wish I had had a film like this when I was younger, when I was coming out. But at the same time, I think also hearing, you know, back from teens now that are like, oh, I love this film and like I relate to it. Like I have a girlfriend, XYZ reminded me of my life. All that type of feedback is yeah, really valuable.
And to conclude, I was wondering, now that the film is, you know, soon going to be available for more people to watch, what do you think, if anything, would make a great double feature with Egghead and Twinkie?
Oh man. That's such a fun question. I think actually I got asked this before and I said Juno, and I think I still stand by that because Juno is like very quintessential of like a coming of age story from the early 2000s. And I feel like this is kind of like Juno for the 2020s, maybe.
It's like the evolution of Juno. What is it,
Right.
18 years later? Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about the film. It's touching, it's meaningful, it's fresh, it's entertaining, awkward, silly, everything in between. Egghead and Twinkie is coming soon on VOD. Is there anything else you can tell us about where the film is available to watch?
Yeah, it's available now on Amazon, Apple TV, Canopy, Kinema, Google Play, et cetera, in North America. And then we'll be expanding internationally this summer.
Well, thank you very much again. And you can check out Egghead and Twinkie on all those platforms. And thanks again to our audience for listening to another episode of the First Reviews.
Thanks so much.